Weihenstephaner Helles.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. Today, Weihenstephaner, the oldest brewery in the world, but I'll get onto that in a bit. It's a bit disputed. This is their Helles. Now, there's a bit of confusion around this one because they do two Helleses, and I've reviewed one on the channel. It's the original Helles. This is another one that they've brought in, and it's one of them beers that you've got to wonder what the differences are. And there are some differences. I will get onto that in a bit. I don't know why they've done this. I mean, I've watched a couple of videos on their channel and they're just explaining that, I mean, to be honest, it's marketing nonsense, that they like to expand their beer range to give customers lighter beer. If you're wondering what that snoring is, that's Percy. He's snoring his arse off because this heat is killing him. Yeah, poor old Percy is not suited to the heat, takes after the owner. Anyway, enough about that. The beer, I think, is going to be a good one because everything that comes out of that brewery is great. Now, there's a bit of a bone of contention with the date on which they were founded. It's widely sort of accepted that they are the oldest brewery in the world. However, there is another brewery, Klosterweltenberg, who can claim that title as well. And it has been said that Weihenstephaner's claim to be the oldest brewery in the world is, I wouldn't say fraudulent, but not correct. They reckon that what they're basing it on is the fact that they saw an invoice from I think it was for malts or for hops, or no, it wasn't for hops because hops wouldn't have been around. Well, hops weren't used as much, but there was evidence of paperwork to say that there was beer being sold there in 1040. However, it's been touted that is a 16th century fake, and they are not, in fact, the oldest brewery in the world. That is Klosterweltenberg, which I think was founded in 1050. So there's a 10-year difference. These lot were founded in 1040, as they say there. Whether it is, whether it isn't, I don't think it makes much of a difference to me. I love both them breweries. I think both of them breweries do fantastic beer. And I think this one, as I say, is going to be a good one, because if the original Helles is anything to go by, then that was a great beer. Now, I'm not going to really go into the history of the brewery too much. After what I've said about it being the oldest brewery in the world, I've gone into the history on the other reviews that I've done. So if you want to see that, check them out. And there's quite a few. I've reviewed all the beers. I think most of the beers, not all the beers. I've done most of the beers that are on there. And I will go so far as to say that they are one of the best wheat beer brewers in Bavaria, if not Germany, if not the world. Only rivaled by Schneider Weiss, who I think just picked them to the post by a millimetre. But they do fantastic wheat beer, and their Dunkel is exceptional. The Dunkel Weiss beer is exceptional. It's really good. Yeah, you must check that out if you can get hold of it. And to be fair to Weihenstephan, their distribution is quite good. You can get this quite easily in the UK, and you can also get it quite easily in the US as well. So, good things there. Anyway, let's get on to the next section. Okie dokie. Right, this is a 500ml bottle. It is 4.8%. Now, as I say, this is a beer that had confused me, shall I say, because there's an original Helles and there's this. Now, the difference between the two, firstly, is the ABV. If you've got the original Helles, then you'll be drinking a 5.1 beer. This, as I say, I've just said, is a 4.8. The IBUs on the original are 21 IBU, and the IBUs on this are 16. If you're wondering what IBUs are, they're international bittering units, which basically gives you an indication of the bitterness and potentially the hop profile of the beer. And 16 for a Helles is quite sweet, to be honest. In fact, that's one of the sweetest I've seen. They have to be taken into context with the style of beer, as I always say when I'm talking about IBUs. And 21 is reasonably sweet, but 16 is very sweet. So I'm kind of wondering how much of a hop profile is going to be on here. There's two types of hops. There's the Hallertau Select and the Hallertau Sapphire as well. I think the Hallertau Sapphire has got slight orangey notes or mandarin notes on there. And I've seen it used in a few types of beer, and I think that's a hop that was developed in the Hull region of Bavaria, and it's one of their later developed hops. And I think they were, I could be wrong, I think they were developed from Spalter hops. I could be wrong on that. I've mentioned it previously, but I haven't made any notes on this. You just have to take my word for it. I think that's where they developed it from. It was a variation on the Spalt hop, and it's used quite a lot in Bavarian Helles. I've seen it in quite a number of various brewers from Bavaria. I've seen it in quite a few of their beers, and of course it's grown in the Hallertau region of Bavaria, the largest hop growing region in the world. Yeah, but I'm rambling. Let's get it open and let's see what's going on. Right, in case you've noticed, I am trying to cut my reviews down slightly in time because I've seen some of them lately and I'm just rambling on about various things. But people have said they like the history and stuff like that. So, again, I'm going to put that in there. But I've seen some people say, well, in the comments, some people are saying, I'll just get on with the review. So, you're going to have to bear with me on this one. I'm trying to create a happy medium where I'm trying to put as much interesting content in as possible, so just bear with me on that one. Reviews are few and far between now because I've had to cut down on my beer because ye oldie doctor has said you're taking the fucking piss with your blood pressure, but it's not too bad at the moment. It's relatively low. So here we go. That's the cap Helles. Very descriptive. Wouldn't know it was the Weihenstephaner Brewery, the oldest, or allegedly the oldest brewery in the world. Anyway, let's get into the glass, see what's going on. Wow, that is light. That's the first thing that hits me, the light colour on this. That is really light. It's almost like it reminds me of Budweiser in the colour profile. It's very, very light yellow on the nose. There's quite a bit of sulphur, so I'm just going to give that a swig and let that dissipate. And to be honest, I'm not getting much at all on the aroma, which is slightly disappointing. In fact, there isn't much in there at all. What the hell is going on? Normally when you open these Helles up, you do get, well, from my experience, you do get a lot of lemon citrus. That's the first thing that hits you, and then the subtle spicy notes from the noble hops come through on there. But to be honest, there is just very, very vague lemon on this. In fact, if I looked at this, and this is where you shouldn't, and I do it as well, I'm guilty of this, but if you look at beers through what they look like, you can be deceived, and that's why I think people do tend to drink with their eyes. But if you can see that is very, very light, and that glass is very, very dirty. I do apologise for that. There isn't much of a carbonation on there, and the head is dissipating. Could be because the room is quite warm in here. Oh, there's vague bready malt notes coming through here, but overall there isn't much of an aroma, which is slightly disappointing. Anyway, as I always say, the proof is in the tasting, so let's shut up and let's get this tasted. Zum Wohl, as they say in Germany. Wow. That is disappointing. That really does surprise me. From a brewery as good as that. That really is nondescript. And in a blindfold test, if I looked at it and I smelt it, I wouldn't say it was macro brewed, but I'd say it's pretty average. Now, I do get it. I think what they're trying to do is they brew a lighter lager, but the differences between the original Helles, which was fantastic, you had all the aromas and all the flavours. I mean, the original was, as I say, 5.1, the IBUs were 21. This is 16 and 4.8. The differences should be minimal, but this is disappointing, I have to say. What is the sell-by date on this? 15th of the 5th, 24. So this is relatively fresh. And it hasn't really bowled me over at all. That's a real shame. I was expecting, you know, the usual caper from the Bavarians when they brew a Helles, the huge honey sweetness, the bready malt finish, and the subtle spicy notes of the noble hop. And to be honest, there isn't much of any of that. Certainly not the honey sweetness. I'm not getting that at all. I'm not getting the big bready finish that you normally would associate with Bavarian Helleses. And the noble hop profile, or the hop profile on this, is very, very subdued. Wow. In its defence, it's full-bodied, and it is, how can I put this? It's drinkable, and I imagine this is going to be really refreshing in the hot weather. So if you was in a beer garden, I would say, I'd go out on a limb here, and I'd say this is more suited to for when you're eating something. This would, I imagine, would go down quite well indeed, because it's got not much of a flavour profile, but it's a palate cleanser, and it's nice in that respect. But in terms of big flavour and just drinkability, it ain't doing it for me, unfortunately, which is a real shame. Why the hell has that happened? There's no nasties in there, so it's good on that respect. I wouldn't have expected there to be anyway, but it just doesn't bowl me over with the flavour. A real disappointment, unfortunately. There's nothing really that I can say that stands out in the flavour profile. Vague bready malt on the finish, slight lemon citrus, slightly spicy notes from the hops, but all very, very subdued. I have to say, Weihenstephaner, this is a little bit disappointing by your standards. So, what is the verdict on Weihenstephaner Helles? Well, I was expecting big things, and to be honest, I'm very, very disappointed in that. There are no nasties in it, put it that way. It's certainly drinkable. There's no real off flavours, there's no real nastiness in there, and I wouldn't expect there to be anyway from this brewery, but I don't know, the flavour profile is really subdued. It just doesn't have the big, the huge bready malt finish that you get with good Bavarian Helleses. It's there, but it's just insipid. Same with the hop profile as well. The spice on there, negligible. The honey sweetness from the yeast, negligible. On its good side, it has got quite a full body on it, and it is a palate cleanser. It's refreshing, and I'd imagine, I mean, they haven't labelled it as such, but I imagine that would go really well with food, because when you're eating food, you don't want too many flavours, in my opinion. I think I'm of the opinion that drinking beer with food is better than drinking wine. Now, people have fucking call that sacrilegious. I know the Italians would, I know the French would, but fuck them. I love me beer. But I don't think when you have these real big flavours coming out of some beers, certain foods it doesn't go with, and it just clashes. And I think this would be perfect for, you know, if you're just sitting in front of the telly watching the football, and you know you got a pizza or something, this would be ideal. But it wouldn't really stand out from any of the other beers. It's certainly refreshing though, and on a hot day, I'd much prefer this to any of the English stuff that you get, and certainly the macro stuff. But overall, compared to some of the other stuff they do, this is a little bit of a disappointment. No, it just isn't doing it for me. I really am trying to find the positives when it comes to the flavour, but I think all you're going to get with that is refreshment and full-bodied. Flavour is, compared to the other stuff, just not there. So on the strength of that, I'm going to give it a 6.5, and the reason I'm going to give it a 6.5, they're a fantastic brewery. They're capable of better things. This, I think, I wouldn't say it's let them down, because it's still a good beer in the grand scheme of things, but compared to their normal standards, this is below par. My advice to you is to go for the original Helles, which is fantastic. I think I gave that a 10 out of 10. It's just a superb beer. It just isn't up to that standard, which is a real shame. And again, I do question why they've got two very, very similar beers. And you know, if they were going to do two similar beers, or when I say two similar style beers with such very close ABVs, very close IBUs, I do question why they've done it. You know, if they'd have done a lighter beer at, say, like, I don't know, 3% or something like that, 2.5, I could understand that. That would make perfect sense. But to have two beers that close of in an ABV, yeah, I don't really know why they've done it. Perhaps it would be a good comparison video to do, although I'm not sure how widely available this stuff is. This was brought over by my mate Norby from Germany, and yeah, I do appreciate that, mate. And I know it was a freebie, but this isn't up to their usual standard, mate. Honestly, it's a bit of a disappointment. And that's on the strength of that, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, purely because I know they can do some fantastic stuff, and this isn't fantastic. And remember, beer is working class champagne.